This is the New American Media. Broadcasting to you from the Milky Way galaxy, the solar system, planet Earth, the United States of America, California, Los Angeles to be specific. Hello everybody, welcome to Agree to Disagree. You know, this is a good title for today's program, Agree to Disagree. Who killed John F. Kennedy? Ooh, how about this? Did anyone kill JFK? Or is he living with Andy Kaufman somewhere? How about that one? Did you hear that? Andy Kaufman's brother just came out and said that Andy faked his own death? It's pretty interesting. So is JFK really dead? No, I'm just kidding. But on Agree to Disagree, we're going to talk about different theories of who killed our president while he was sitting in a car down in Dallas. Bringing in Bruce Engelman. Bruce is, well, full disclosure, this is my uncle. He is an author of a book called Eternal Flame, lives down in the Fort Worth area, and he's one of the foremost experts that I know of regarding the Kennedy assassination. So agree or disagree? Oswald acted alone. Do you agree or disagree with that? So we're going to get into that in just a second. Real quick, if you haven't been to our homepage, please take a look. Swing on by, take a look at what we got going on there. TheNewAmericanMedia.com. If you have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TheNewAmericanMedia. Follow us on Twitter. We're at American_media_. And then on Facebook, search The New American Media with spaces in between and like our page. We would greatly appreciate that. But let us know, do you agree or disagree that Oswald acted alone? Or like Andy Kaufman, is he really dead? Just kidding. Anyway, let's get Bruce into the program because I could ramble all day, but, you know, sometimes I have guests from time to time, people that really know what they're talking about. And Bruce will be one of them. So let's get him on the horn and get this going.
Hello?
Bruce, it's Brian. You are live on Agree to Disagree. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fine, Brian. How are you today, and how's everything in sunny California?
Well, I'm living the dream. That's what I'm always doing, but I think you know that from every time we speak.
Yes.
How are things in Southern California or sunny California?
I said sunny, but either.
Yeah, hang on. Let me look out the window. Sunny-ish. How are things for you? Where are you at right now? You down in Dallas-Fort Worth or what?
Dallas-Fort Worth, we had about 76 degrees and clear skies and sunny today. Beautiful weather. I understand they had snow up in Cleveland and Youngstown, and Chicago, so I don't miss it a bit.
Yeah. You escaped Ohio, as did I, as did a lot of people that we know, and you've been on our program, on our other Cleveland sports program, talking about some sports, and you know I feel like talking to some Texas Rangers and seeing if you think that the Cowboys or the Browns are going to get wild card berths, but I just want to get to JFK. You know, maybe at the end we could do like a little overtime and bounce around with all these other topics, because you and I tend to talk for hours and hours anyway. Shocking.
Right.
And a pastor and a talk show host can talk forever. Two Engelman. Shocking, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, let's talk about this, shall we? You were the author of a book, Eternal Flame. You now live in Fort Worth, Texas. You've been to the grassy knoll. It was a really interesting experience, especially meeting Governor Ventura. Feel free to talk about that in a little bit. But let's just pause before we get into all the details of the book. And it's 50 years. What... Can you believe that it's been 50 years already? Let's just start with something that basic. Can you believe it's been 50?
I can't, Brian, and I still remember the event. I was a young child growing up in Cleveland. My father, your grandfather, worked for NASA, and he came home, and we went over to another dear friends of our family. The gentleman worked with your grandpa at NASA at the Lewis Research Center in Cleveland, Ohio, right next to Cleveland Hopkins International Airport, and it just seems like yesterday. And, you know, it seems like just minutes ago I was with Governor Ventura on the grassy knoll for the 40th anniversary. It's really hard to believe one of the three seminal moments in history Pearl Harbor and 9/11 being the other two, has been 50 years ago. I just can't imagine that, because President Kennedy was so young, so vivacious, and he's kind of frozen in time. And so it's really hard to grasp and wrap your mind around the fact that it's been 50 years.
No, that's interesting that he's frozen in time. You know, there's I had this poster hanging up in my band rehearsal area for a long time. It's Forever 27. And it's kind of like this waiting area, kind of like a bar, like a lounge. And it has Janis Joplin hanging out there with Jimi Hendrix. Jim Morrison is there. And Kurt Cobain is kind of walking through the pearly gates, like hanging out with them. Like they all died at 27, all immortalized as young people. So it's like when you see pictures, they never age. They do become immortalized. And you don't think of an old JFK like you do like a old George Herbert Walker Bush, you know, down in Texas once again. It's interesting how it can just kind of, what was that in Jurassic Park where the mosquito gets trapped in amber and then they pull the DNA out later, perfectly preserves it. But, you know, with the 50-year anniversary now, aren't we supposed to be getting new revelations about who really killed JFK? Isn't that what we're supposed to have? And what happened to that?
We were supposed to, but the mainstream media, along with our government, continue to hide the facts. You know, we don't have assassinations in this country anymore, so we're told. Those are for banana republics and third world nations. We don't have coup d'etats. And so the government and the mainstream media has been absolutely successful, 100% successful for the most part, in hiding the fact that this man was gunned down in broad daylight on an American street, and his perpetrators got away with it. Nobody saw Oswald shoot him, and the myth continues. And that's why I've often said my book, Brian, is counter-myth. And
counter-myth? Hold on. Explore that. A counter-myth. How do you mean?
Yes, my book is counter-myth because I wrote it almost like a historical novel, a very easy read novel to boot. But it is nonfiction. But yeah, the Warren Commission was myth. I mean, you know, the 55 people that saw or witnessed somebody shooting over the grassy knoll fence were not interviewed by the Warren Commission, and many facts were blurred. And now we got Bill O'Reilly perpetrating this myth. He shows the superintendent or one of the foremen of the depository going up and down on the shipping elevator to the 6th floor and letting Oswald out, and the superintendent comes up and talks to Lee Harvey Oswald. Brian, the shipping elevator was broken on November 22nd, 1963, and that is a key piece of evidence. That is a very key component, because with the elevator being broken that day, that means that Oswald had to have run down the stairs from the 6th floor, which is virtually impossible, especially in light of the fact he was eating his lunch and had his hand up a Coke machine. And Officer Marion Baker and Roy Truly, the superintendent of the entire building, said that he was not, he had not broken a sweat or anything like that. And by the way, Bill O'Reilly knows that Oswald did not kill the president, and yet he's continuing to pass along this myth and perpetrate it in the mainstream media. And so it gets very frustrating. But my book broke open the fact that there was definitely a major conspiracy, and that Oswald was more than likely what he said he was, and that was a patsy. And that was by your uncle breaking the major Rose Sheremy murder case. I'm the only investigator to ever interview the alleged killer of Rose Cheramie.
And for people who want to do some research on that, how do you spell Cheramie?
Cheram as in Mary, I-E. Cheramie, which was actually her stage name. She was a dancer for Jack Ruby's club.
Dana.
And she had pre-knowledge of the assassination and told the Louisiana State Police 2.5 days before the murder that President Kennedy was going to be assassinated in Dallas-Fort Worth by her boss, Jack Ruby, not Lee Harvey Oswald. We have come to find out that Jack Ruby, who was running guns to Cuba, who was probably on the payroll of the CIA, who was a key mafia figure in the Dallas area, was more than just this insignificant nightclub owner who just happened to wipe out the patsy because, or the alleged assassin because he didn't want Mrs. Kennedy to come back to Dallas and have to go through the grief of a murder trial, or out of patriotism, or out of the fact he loved Kennedy so much it was, an act of revenge. Rose Cheramie told the Louisiana State Police 2 days before the murder that my boss, Jack Ruby, is going to kill the president. Well, what happens? We see Jack Ruby on the grassy knoll. We see Jack Ruby at Parkland Hospital, probably placing the magic bullet, our inspector's magic bullet on the gurney. We see him, and it's on film. It's recorded on film and video. We see him at the midnight press conference asking questions with the international media at the so-called 12 o'clock midnight press conference with Lee Harvey Oswald when the Dallas cops dragged him out. This guy was a major figure in the crime. And then he wipes out the patsy on Sunday morning, right before the funeral, in front of millions of viewers on 2 live networks. So the whole thing is a sham, and it amazes me that the mainstream media will not seek the truth on this.
We're talking with author Bruce Engelman, author of the book Eternal Flame. Do me a favor, jump back for a second, because the Killing Kennedy, the Killing Lincoln, the Killing Jesus series from Bill O'Reilly. I do catch him from time to time, but I will admit I don't know his entire body of work. But describe, if you will, as far as what you know, what his book Killing Kennedy is about, because you were just listing the elevator being broken. So can you just elaborate on that? Because I really don't know what he had to say on it and what you've studied him saying about it.
Yes. Now, let me say this. I have not read the book Killing Christ. I did see about 15 minutes of the docudrama Killing Lincoln. That was pretty good. And I like Bill O'Reilly. I really do like him a lot. I've always said he's a liberal. He tries to pass himself off as a conservative. Bill is a liberal. There's no mistake about that. But he's a good man. I like him. He's entertaining. He's a good interviewer when he lets his guests talk a little bit. But he said on Fox and Friends when the book was first released, Killing Kennedy, that he believes that Oswald did it. He covered the opening of the case in the 70s with the House Select Committee on Assassinations when he was a correspondent for ABC News, and which right there tells me he knows that Oswald probably did not do it, or he was just the patsy. And then at the end of the interview with Fox and Friends in the Morning, with Brian Kilmeade and those folks, he says, but the one question I do have, George D. Moreauenschild. Well, that name meant nothing to 90% of the viewers of Fox and Friends early that morning when he was promoting this book. But as a student of the assassination, I know that George D. Moreauenschild, who was an oil tycoon, a white Russian who was anti-communist, and a Russian immigrant, was probably Oswald's handler for the CIA. And shortly before Moreauenschild was to have testified before the House Select Committee on Assassinations, he turns up dead of a shotgun wound, as did many of the witnesses, like Sam Giancana and Sam Roselli, before they were supposed to testify before the House Committee in the 70s on the JFK assassination. Why isn't the press asking these questions? All these witnesses and all these suspects that were supposed to testify before Congress during the House Select Committee on Assassinations, by the way, chaired by your former Congressman Louis Stokes in Cleveland, why did they pop up dead the day before they were supposed to testify? That alone, Brian says, there was a major conspiracy and a massive cover-up. But anyway, O'Reilly knows that there's more to this than Oswald doing it. When he stated on Fox and Friends that he does have one question mark, quote, George D. Moreauenschild, that told me that O'Reilly is just perpetuating the myth to peddle another book.
Bruce, you just sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist, I gotta say. Where are you even coming from? Where's your tinfoil hat, pal?
Yeah,
no, I mean,
actually, Brian, I'm not a conspiracy nut. I do not see an assassin behind every post. I don't see a conspiracy behind every post or a conspiracy theory behind every political happening. I do not think that we blew up our own buildings on 9/11. I do not think that Roosevelt knew about the Pearl Harbor attack and didn't do anything about it. I'm not a conspiracy nut. I'm an investigative reporter who deals with facts. And the facts are 55 people saw somebody shooting over the picket fence, and not one of them was called by the Warren Commission. The fact is that the elevator was not working on the day of the assassination, which meant that Oswald would have had to have hidden the gun behind some boxes and laid down those cartridges in nice order. They say he hung out in the window for a couple seconds as well, then made a mad dash across the floor of the sixth-floor warehouse, then run down those stairs. And there's a new book out, The Lady on the Stairs, or The Woman on the Stairs. There were two women going up and down those stairwells during the assassination. And it took this investigative reporter 40 years, and his name slips me, to track these ladies down. He finally has, after 45, 50 years, and they said that they were on that stairwell virtually the whole time that President Kennedy was going by, before, during, and after the murder, and they never saw Oswald on the stairwell. Well, of course they didn't. Oswald was never in the sixth floor. He was eating his lunch on the second floor. And as Jesse Ventura said, if I just shot the president, I'm not going to be hanging around to have a Coca-Cola. Brian, I deal with facts. Nobody wants to listen to facts. And how about Rose Cheramie telling the Louisiana State Police that the president is going to be shot in 2.5 days? Let me get to knowledge and foreknowledge of the assassination. Those are facts.
Let me get to Rose Sheremy in a second. The book you were talking about, The Girl on the Stairs, My Search for a Missing Witness to the Assassination of John F. Kennedy. That is by author Barry Ernest, E-R-N...
Thank you.
Wait, M? In Ernest, E-R-N-E-S-T. Before we get to Rose Sheremy, though, because, that is one of the unique things that you bring to the table, but as I was clowning around, obviously, joking with you about conspiracy theorists, because I raised my hand and, throw any sticks and stones you want. I'm just a curious guy, and if I'm not 100% sold, I don't jump to conclusions that everything is as crazy as the craziest idea I've heard, but I will stop short of believing an official narrative on things. I leave a lot of books open. I don't know exactly what happened in a lot of situations, but you said you're an investigative journalist. Can you just give us we're kind of doing this interview a little scattershot here, but I'm all right with that. I never mind doing things out of order. But tell people about your background, because you said you're an investigative journalist. You worked at a whole bunch of various places, just so people have a perspective of where you're coming from and your background a little bit.
Yes, Brian. Before I went into the ministry, I worked for a total of 8 radio stations, and even worked for one after I went into the ministry in Chicago, working my way through seminary as an anchorman and a reporter. I've done investigative reporting work for quite a few radio stations. I was a writer for United Press International. I started out the same way Walter Cronkite did. I was a stringer reporter for the old UPI wire service, United Press International. I also began as a journalist with the Pittsburgh Tribune Review, which is now the largest newspaper in Pennsylvania. I did human interest stories primarily with that, and a little bit of sports. I've written sports. I've covered major events like the presidential debate in 1980. I've worked for 3 TV stations. I started anchoring the sports on our local TV station in Indiana, Pennsylvania when I was 18, and just coming out of high school. I hadn't even been off to college yet. I'm anchoring the sports on Channel 9, Indiana, PA, outside of Pittsburgh, and then I've worked for ABC News and CBS News. And so, I've done all 3 media. I've done TV, radio, and newsprint. And a fourth, if you want to call the wire service a fourth venue of dissemination of information. So I think I see today reporters are very weak, many of them, in writing. They don't check their sources. They just run with a story. And then we have the social media where everything is instant, and nothing is checked out anymore. But back in the day, we had to check our sources. And I used my, 8.5 years as a reporter and a writer to write this book and to carry on the investigation of the JFK assassination. As a little boy, as a little kid, growing up in Cleveland and later Pittsburgh, I'm going, why did this mafia man who owns a nightclub with CIA ties walk in front of 30 policemen and blow away the suspect of the President of the United States, the alleged assassin and the suspect of the 35th President of the United States? What is going on? As a kid, I'm going, this makes no sense. And then he dies suddenly of supposedly cancer a couple years later in the Dallas County Jail. And as a kid, I'm going, this makes no sense. And the old 4 Days that came out by United Press International and the Cleveland Press newspaper, which is now defunct, I read that over and over again as a kid. I'm saying this case doesn't make any sense. And now I'm 11 and 12, and I'm reading it. I'm going parts of the Warren Commission report. I'm going, this really makes no sense. And then when I'm a junior in high school, they reopened the case, the House Select Committee on Assassinations, my junior, senior year in high school, and my freshman year in college, and my first year as a TV news reporter, and I started reading and hearing things that just did not add up. And I'm saying, wait a minute, how did this guy get off 3 shots, Oswald allegedly, with an old, inaccurate, bolt-action rifle shooting through a tree and a moving target going away from his sniper's nest? This makes no sense. There was also a big sign there that said Stedman's Freeway. His vision was blocked by the tree and the Stedman sign for most of the shooting. Plus, Brian, I started talking to people around the nation. What were you doing when you heard of President Kennedy? Similar to Pearl Harbor and you and I with 9/11. Everybody has a recollection of where they were when they first heard President Kennedy had been shot, and some amazing stories I've acquired over the years. But people would often say to me, Bruce, I think Lyndon Johnson had it done. I think so-and-so. I think J. Edgar Hoover had it done. I think the mob had it. Nobody ever really, unless they were a robot, nobody ever really told me, I think Oswald did do it. Nobody ever bought that story. And then I started interviewing people that were there in Dealey Plaza, and I have yet to talk to one, and I've talked to hundreds, who heard 3 shots. Everybody I've interviewed, 100%, in the 20 years I've been investigating this case, have heard 4 shots. Now, how do you get off 4 shots? I know there were some people that heard 3, okay? But even Merriman Smith, who won a Pulitzer Prize for his coverage, a fellow United Press International reporter, said, yeah, he heard 3 shots, but they were like machine gun fires. Bam, 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 bam. Automatic rifle fires, the way he described the first report coming over the wire service. He was 3 or 4 cars behind the president. So I started asking these questions because people were asking me these questions. So I decided finally to write a book that was open-minded and not slanted too much one way or the other, with a little bit of a spiritual and religious perspective, because I am now a pastor and a clergyman, and there's never been a book written with a little bit of a spiritual slant. And so Eternal Flame was a big hit, and it's supposed to be re-released this coming week. The publisher have been kind of dragging the feet with it, but we get requests for it all the time, and it's a good book, if I do say so myself.
Well, if somebody wants to keep checking for it, where should they go? Let me ask you that.
Basically, Amazon.com
okay.
is the best place. They can also try on Craigslist or some of the other venues on social media.
Gotcha. You're talking about even when you were a little kid, Bruce, the story never made sense. To some people, 9/11 never made sense. We'll just put that aside for now. We don't need to get into that. But Benghazi, Libya. Yeah, you remember the official story for that one, in a nutshell?
Oh, it boiled my blood. They had that Susan Reich, whatever her name is, going on all the talk shows. I think she was on 6 different talk shows Sunday morning, saying that it was a riot over some 2-rate video in Hollywood.
Yeah, some YouTube video. Yep.
Yeah, YouTube, and I'm going, this is a bigger cover-up than the JFK assassination.
I never bought that for a second. Nobody bought that.
No, nobody bought that. We knew it was an Al-Qaeda attack, and the fact that they left this fine ambassador totally unprotected, and then Hillary Clinton says during the committee, when she's being interviewed during that Senate subcommittee by Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, she says, well, so they're dead. So what? What can I do about it now? Boy, oh boy, you talk about first a major cover-up, and then a denial, and then a backtracking, and now the future presidential nominee, and she will get the nomination for the Democratic Party. Everybody knows that. She's saying, well, it's no big deal. 2 Navy SEALs lost their lives, and these 2 other men lost their lives, and an ambassador was assassinated for the first time in 30 years. What can I do about it? It's no big deal.
Here, let me.
If I were the Republicans, I'd be running that clip every 10 seconds.
Let me play the clip real quick.
Again, we were misled that there were supposedly protests, and then something sprang out of that, an assault sprang out of that. And that was easily ascertained that was not the fact. And the American people could have known that within days, and they didn't know that.
With all due respect, the fact is we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make? It is our job to figure out what happened and do everything we can to prevent it from ever happening again, Senator. Now,
Bruce, what difference at this point does it make that we said it was about a YouTube video and trying to squash our First Amendment right to freedom of speech and all of that jazz? That story never added up for me, and just like Syria. Oh, well, this guy's using chemical weapons, so now we got to go in there. Huh? Why are we going into Syria? Well, we got to help the rebels. You mean Al-Qaeda? Well, yeah, that other guy used weapons, used chemical weapons. Wait, you mean we want to help the people in Al-Qaeda that are beheading people that are Christians in Syria? Did Syria make any sense to you? Because it seemed like they were ramping up a war over there. It just reminded me, as you said, when you were a little boy watching the JFK thing, none of the dots connected for you. Did you get the same feeling with Syria?
Oh, absolutely I did. And we kept switching sides in Syria as we have in Egypt, and this whole Arab Spring thing is a disaster, just like the administration's health care program is a disaster. But going back to Benghazi, yeah, you're right. It's another Syria. It's another JFK cover-up. First to send this woman out there as the sacrificial lamb, and by the way, she's been given a promotion since then, to say that, it was just an overreaction to this very terrible video on YouTube, and then the president and Secretary Clinton go on the air, and they continue to, just lambaste that video, when really it had very, very little, or if anything, to do with the attack. And then for her to say to Senator Paul, what difference does it make? What difference does it make that 2 Navy SEALs, a 3rd bodyguard, and an ambassador were assassinated, and we didn't even send in reinforcements to back them up? I'll tell you what, if this had been a Republican administration, there would be hearing after hearing after hearing. People would be resigning, and there would be impeachments. It's just incredible how the media covers up for this administration.
Hillary never called a second time to figure out what the update was. They didn't know where Ambassador Stevens' body was. The president was asleep, getting rest to go party in Las Vegas with Jay-Z and Beyonce for a political fundraiser. What difference at this point does it make? It seemed to make a difference, but I guess I'm sitting here in 2013, Bruce, and I do alternative media here with the New American Media. And
you do a good job, if I may say so myself, even though you are my nephew and godson.
You may say it. You may say it a bunch of times. Here, can you say it one more time, sir? No, I'm just kidding. Thank you. But in 2013, a lot of the new media that's broadcasting online and kind of offering a counter opinion to the dinosaur media, as I call it. Some people call it mainstream or lamestream. I just like dinosaur because it's gone. We are pretty conditioned at this point to look at a story, whether it's the Boston bombing, whether it's a TSA shooting in Los Angeles, whether it's Newtown. Newtown happens, bam, hey, we got to push for gun regulations. Something happens, and it's just like everything that we see. I know a lot of people like me that question whatever official story comes out. And maybe it's partially because, like you said, everyone you talk to, nobody ever believed the Warren Commission. Nobody ever believed Benghazi. There was a YouTube video. Nobody believes Syria. Oh, we got to get in there for chemical weapons. What? They've killed how many tens of thousands of people? Now a couple hundred died with chemical weapons. Now we got to go in there? That doesn't make a lick of sense. It doesn't make sense. Why are we supporting the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt? Oh, it's the uprising.
Thank you. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah, we got to do that. But take 2013 to go back to the JFK thing. And as you start investigating as a boy and growing up, were people, as you were a young adult, do you think they were as skeptical of the government as we are today, or do you think it's more or less? That's what I'm trying to get at in that long-winded question to you.
Yes, very good question, Brian. In 1962-63, there was kind of a collective innocence that our country had. We were very victorious in World War II and World War I. We'd come out of the Depression. Your grandparents and my parents were living the dream through the 50s of the Eisenhower years. And there was a little bit of a naivete and a great trust in the government. All that ended on November 22nd, 1963. And that monumental event, that terrible event, seemed to coalesce into the Vietnam War and Watergate and Whitewater and all the way to Benghazi Gate. And it seems like since then, said, Americans have not trusted their government. But the whole scope, no pun intended, of the Kennedy assassination, that this communist lone nut pulled off the greatest exhibit of shooting since Annie Oakley, and then went up to Oak Cliff and shot a policeman, and I'm still not sure about that whole scenario with Officer J.D. Tippit. But yes, the people, most free-thinking people, never completely bought the government's take or the media's take, i.e. the Warren Commission, this myth that this crazed gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, for publicity, wiped out the president at age 24. We talk about this guy like he's 64. He was a kid. He was 24. He was out of the Marine Corps. We're not even sure which Oswald it was. There are so many different Lee Harvey Oswalds, so many different aliases. There were so many imposters running around Dallas 2, 3, 4 weeks before the assassination. We're not even sure who this guy was. But Jim Garrison, the former and late Attorney General for the Louisiana Parish, New Orleans Parish, rather, in Louisiana, he actually came to the conclusion that Oswald was trying to foil the plot, which may have been true. And we have another case of a CIA agent who tried to foil the plot. They tried to frame him for it. He went in and held up a bank in El Paso so he could be in jail on November 22nd, 1963, because as an intelligent operative, he saw very quickly he was in the process of being framed. And in essence, he was trying to foil the plot. And there is a possibility that Oswald was actually trying to expose this plot because he was going to the local FBI office in Dallas, and he was writing to Mr. Hunt, hello, of Watergate fame, and also Mr. Hunt, the oil tycoon. He had all kinds, George D. Moreau and Schild. He had all these connections in the intelligent and law enforcement communities of Dallas that it's just incredible. So you're right, and the media has died today. The Fort Worth Star-Telegram is now having the Dallas Morning News publish their newspapers. Nobody reads the papers anymore, and people are tired of this ultra-liberal slant from the New York Times and the Los Angeles Times. We have an administration that can't even put a website up on correctly, for crying out loud.
No, but we should trust them to run 1/6 of the economy in every important decision of my life, but they can't run a website, of course. No, and I don't care about left-wing slant or right-wing slant. I just want what's going on. I feel, what's so crazy, Bruce, I feel like I have to go to Al Jazeera and Russia Today to find actual news about my own government with what's going on because they're lying so much. Edward Snowden had to run out of here to talk to everybody in the world about what Fourth Amendment violations our own government is doing to us on a daily basis. I don't know how anyone can really look at the dinosaur media today as anything more than just an extension and an arm of propaganda. I don't know. Maybe you and me are a little unique in that position, but I don't think so. I think most people are seeing through the lies at this point.
I think so. And as far as the liberal slant is concerned, I'm with you. Liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat, I'm to the point where I could really care less anymore. I'm more of an independent and a constitutionalist than anything else. You've kind of won me over to the Paul family, both Rand and Ron.
I'm clapping. I'm clapping.
But I like to seek truth. The Bible says you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Ironically, the slogan of the CIA, which does nothing but lie, and they have to understand their spies and their spooks, but I just seek the truth, and I'm finding that I get a little more truth, not much, but a little more truth through some elements of the Republican Party. The whole Democratic Party today is they're just rooters and cheerleaders for the Obama administration. The days of the Democrats like Scoop Jackson and some would argue George Wallace and John F. Kennedy, Harry Truman, that would stand up against members of their own party. Those days are over. Well, you can say one thing about the Democrats: they all stand together. They're 100% voting bloc. By the way, this Obamacare, not one Republican voted for it, and this was the president that was supposed to come across the aisle and work with conservatives, work with Republicans, work with the Tea Party. He hasn't worked with anybody. And now he's apologizing that he didn't know the rates were going to be this high for new insurance, and he's apologizing that people cannot keep their own insurance company, although he rescinded that yesterday and said maybe for another year Even Bill Clinton is totally in shock about this. So, it's just crazy. We have so much incompetence in Washington. All they want to do is cover themselves and leave a legacy. And in the process, who suffers? Your children and grandchildren, my children and grandchildren. And we're not leaving the kind of America that your grandparents left for you. And I fear that the truth is no longer the key goal of the media or the press like it used to be.
Well, I'll tell you what, one of those people that lost their insurance, me. Obama stole my health care, Bruce. I don't think I had a chance to tell you that one yet. But I got the letter. I got the letter. I am somebody out there who got the letter saying that our dear leader deemed my insurance not worthy of what he wants. So I have been booted off of my health care. But it brings me to another point as we're kind of discussing different types of political parties and going back to JFK. Tell me the difference between the JFK Democrat and the Obama Democrat, because 2013 people, the millennials or the teens and the 20-somethings just now maybe getting out of college, trying to work and pay taxes. Explain the difference between what a JFK Democrat was to an Obama Democrat, if you can.
Yes, and I only have about 10 minutes because I'm supposed to be meeting with Bob Schieffer of CBS News, and we're having a little meeting here in downtown Fort Worth about his coverage of the Kennedy assassination. He and Dan Rather covered it locally. Of course, he's a local TCU boy, graduate of Texas Christian University. So in the next 9 or 10 minutes, I'd be glad to do that. World of difference, Brian. The Democrat of 1962-63, like JFK, in many ways, or at least on many positions, many issues, was more conservative than the Republicans today. And I can't get people to understand this. People say, well, I just vote Democratic because my great-grandpappy did and my great-great-grandpappy did, and plus I'm a Southerner, I just vote Democratic because Lincoln was Republican. Well, first of all, John F. Kennedy was against affirmative action, totally against it. He called it quotas. John F. Kennedy was for Reagan tax cuts, Reagan-type tax cuts. Ronald Reagan got many of his policy ideas from JFK. Shortly before the assassination, he was in front of the Chamber of Commerce of New York City outlining his tax cut program. He was for an extremely ballooned defense budget, something that Democrats hate today. They hate the military, not all of them, but most of them. JFK was for the space program. That's where your grandfather worked. JFK said, let's not give too much money toward education. He told Dave Powers, his assistant, that, and Dave said, why? And JFK said, because teachers and educators never have enough money. They never get enough. I want, more money to go for cancer research, more money to go in the space program, which will benefit education indirectly anyway. And so, in many instances, in many ways, he'd be the right of Ronald Reagan today. He'd be the right to George W. Bush today. And it's a world of difference. It's almost like the parties have switched. The Republicans of today are like the Democrats back yonder, i.e. Henry Cabot Lodge and Lowell Weicker and those type of cloth coat Republicans. And the Democrats like Kennedy of 62, 63 are like some of the Tea Party people today, like the Rand Paul people. So labels today mean nothing to me.
Well, let me do this then while we have you for another 8 minutes or so. Rose Cheramie.
May I say this, Brian?
Yeah.
JFK would not be welcome in his own party today.
Wow. So in a primary, what kind of guy would JFK have been? Because I know you're a political geek just like me, and you watch the primaries. I know Obama's, he didn't have anyone to run up against him in his own party this time around. But can you compare a JFK character that didn't get the love from his party that you've seen in the past couple of election cycles? Anyone jump to mind? How they weren't really welcome, how they didn't quite emerge from the pack?
Yes, Jack Kemp, about 3 or 4 election cycles ago when he was Bob Dole's running mate, he was very Kennedy-esque. I think in some policy ways, Ron Paul, and even more so Rand, and I just met Rand out in Iowa, very impressed with this young man. I think there's a few, and the Crane brothers back in the early 80s were kind of Republican John F. Kennedys, if you will. And, of course, the Democrats always try to market their candidate to look and act like JFK, which is really ironic. They went out of their way to market Jimmy Carter to resemble Kennedy and act like Kennedy, Bill Clinton to look and resemble Kennedy, and lately Barack Obama to act, he's the modern JFK. When in reality, these guys are a million miles to the left, politically speaking, of JFK. And, there have been a few. Chris Christie's trying to act like a fat JFK.
So you're not in the Christie camp necessarily.
I like the guy, but no, he's a far, far, far left-wing Republican, and it's going to be him and Rand Paul. You mark it down. You heard it here first. Hillary's got it locked up for the Dems, and it's going to be Chris Christie versus Rand Paul as the front runners for the Republicans. I like Chris Christie, but I don't trust him.
No, that's fair enough, and it's interesting you met Rand in Iowa. They do any straw polls out there? Anything going for election season? Iowa have any significance? Of course it does. But we only have you for a couple minutes. Rose Cheramie, let's break this down, because this is one of the key components of your book. Let's get into this. You kind of touched on the fact so far that she told the Louisiana State Police that her boss, Jack Ruby, was going to kill the president in Dallas 2 days before the shooting. Tell us about the events leading up to this, how it played out, and why it was never really followed up upon in a way that you think it should have been.
Rose was dispatched to Florida to meet with two mobsters. She rendezvoused with these two underworld crime syndicate figures. She told the authorities later that she wasn't sure if they were Cubans or Italian Americans, and she rode from Miami, Florida, with these two gangsters in an automobile, and all along the way they were discussing their drug running. They were supposed to pick up more drugs in Galveston, Texas, and as they got to Louisiana, just outside of a little town called Eunice, Louisiana, they started talking about Jack's plans, her boss, to kill the president in 3 days. And she said, wait a minute, I didn't know that I was going to be part of a conspiracy to murder President Kennedy. She said, I will run drugs for Jack, but I am not going to kill anybody, and I'm certainly not going to kill the president. And they tried to kill her. They thought they had killed her. They beat her to a pulp and threw her out of a moving car and tried to run over her. And somebody found her body and rushed her to the Eunice Hospital. And that's where the doctors called Lieutenant Fruget of the Louisiana State Police, because in a delirium as they were operating on her, she kept saying, they're going to kill the president, they're going to kill the president, they're going to kill Kennedy, they're going to kill Kennedy. And when she came to and became coherent, the doctor said, what do you kept saying they're going to kill the president? Who is? My boss, Jack Ruby. Now, bear in mind, Brian, she never invoked the name Lee Oswald. She kept saying, my boss, Jack Ruby. So they call in Lieutenant Fruget, and he interrogates her. He says, Rose, who is this Jack Ruby? Who's your boss? Well, I'm a dancer for a burlesque club in downtown Dallas called the Carousel Club, and Jack is my boss, and we were running some drugs to Miami, and then we're going to pick up some more drugs in Galveston. She told Lieutenant Fruget the story of getting thrown out of the vehicle, and these two mobsters left her for dead. Well, and again, Fruget didn't know who Ruby was. The doctors didn't know who Ruby was at this point. Well, 2.5 days later or less, boom, Kennedy gets shot on Friday, just like Rose predicted. And then on Sunday, this Ruby murders the alleged suspect, Lee Harvey Oswald, and Fruget's watching it on TV with his friends or his family, and he jumps in his police car, and he runs to the hospital and arrests Rose Cheramie. And as he's taking her to the police station, he said, who is this Jack Ruby? I know you told me that he was going to kill the president. Instead, he kills the president's killer. And she says he is a bedmate, quote-unquote, a bedmate. She said that Ruby was a homosexual and Oswald was bisexual, and they were together all the time in the Carousel Club, and she would later say with David Ferry. Well, when Jim Garrison opened the case, and by the way, the Warren Commission totally dismissed her testimony, as they did all testimony that went against Arlen Specter and Earl Warren. So a couple years later, when Jim Garrison opens the case in Louisiana, he tries to get Rose to come to New Orleans to testify, and she's thrown out of another car and run over again. And I tracked down the man who ran over her. His interview is in my book. She died the next day at a local hospital in Glaywater, Texas. And so,
and the guy that
this proves, A, there was a foreknowledge of the assassination. Number two, it was a massive conspiracy. Number three, Jack Ruby had far more to do with it. And number four, his responsibility was probably to wipe out the patsy.
Wow. All right. Well, I think we're just about out of time here, and that's a great tease for your book. Tell us one more time what it's called, where they can find it, and briefly, if you just want to touch on your time with Jesse Ventura down there. It's one of my favorite little stories.
Sure. Of course, he has a great show on conspiracies on cable now, on satellite. It's Eternal Flame. It's by Bruce Engelman, Engelman. You can go on Amazon.com. You can go on Craigslist or any of those other venues and order it, and eBay and so forth. And it's a great read. You can go to your bookstore and request it, too. A lot of the half-price bookstores have copies of it. And we're hoping to have it come out just in time for the 50th anniversary here in Dallas-Fort Worth. And as I said, I'm going to be meeting with Bob Schieffer in about 10 minutes. He's going to do a little forum here in downtown Fort Worth and discuss the coverage. PBS just did an excellent documentary, Brian, on the CBS coverage with Walter Cronkite, Bob Schieffer, and Dan Rather that day. And even though those three guys have stuck with the lone gunman theory, they did an excellent job of covering. That was when TV news really grew up overnight and surpassed print journalism. Jesse Ventura is a great guy. I don't agree with him on everything, but I respect him. He is the only politician that showed up for the 40th anniversary on the grassy knoll with about 3,000 or 4,000 people. He tells it like it is. You may disagree with Jesse, but he tells it like it is. And contrary to what you read in the press, he's a very religious man. He and I talked about God. We spent almost the whole day together. I think he was a good governor, and a lot of people want him to run for president. But he is who he is. He's a former Navy SEAL, and I'll leave you with this thought. He said, Bruce, I was a trained sniper and hitman for the Navy SEALs, and we were always taught you take the highest percentage shot. If that was Oswald, and he was really a trained U.S. Marine sniper, as the Warren Commission claims, and he was up in that 6th floor perch, he would have taken the shot as the car turned right off of Main onto Houston Street before it made the left-hand turn on Elm. He would not have waited. Oswald would not have waited, Jesse Ventura says, for the car to make a 45-degree turn, go away from the sniper's perch with his back, with Kennedy's back to the sniper, behind a tree and a sign. He said he would have shot him coming down Houston Street off of Main. And Jesse Ventura is right. So God bless you, man. Your show is great. And I know there are people listening all over the country because I texted a bunch of them. And your show is becoming more and more popular. And keep reminding the public about Benghazi Gate.
I'm never giving up on Benghazi. And one last word on Ventura. Maybe they just didn't give Ventura those magic bullets. You know, maybe he had a skewed point of view, Bruce. He just didn't get the magic bullets that could dance around. And I'm just kidding, of course. But
I know that's a good line. That's a good line. Very good line.
No,
yes.
Well, hey, have fun with Bob Schieffer and all of that crew. We'll welcome you back again anytime. We're not dropping Benghazi. The thing just still stinks. Why did they let him get it? You know what happened. Why did they allow that to happen to him? It was a total setup. I'm not dropping that. And, definitely check out Bruce's book. It's called Eternal Flame. Look for it on Amazon.com. Until next time, buddy, we will talk again soon, all right?
Thanks, nephew. God bless you, man. Have a great weekend.
Same to you. Thanks. That was Bruce Engelman, regular contributor over here. Yeah, we got to bring him back, talk some sports. You know? See, and that's what we like to do. We like to kind of mix sports and politics over here. It's just one of our favorite things, but this is the Agree to Disagree show, and we're going to kind of make a hard pivot, and we're going to kind of, go left, go right, whatever pivot. I don't know what direction we're going. We're going to sports. We're going to sports right now because, well, it's what I like to do. We're going to bring in NBA scout Zach Barris. He's going to tell us what the heck is wrong with the Cleveland Cavaliers because it is getting really frustrating. But I bring that up as a little transition to let you know that Bruce is also a very avid sports fan, and we've had him on the program, I don't know, a couple of times over the past 2.5 years. So check the archives. We've had Bruce on before talking politics, talking JFK, talking sports, and we'll bring him back again. So check out his book, Eternal Flame, on Amazon.com. do us a favor, check us out on our homepage, thenewamericanmedia.com. On Facebook, search The New American Media with spaces in between, and like our page. Go on Twitter and follow us. We're at American_media_. And subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/The New American Media. We're going to take just a quick break, and we'll be back on the other side with NBA scout Zach Barris telling us what the heck is wrong with the Cavs. His first-round pick, is he a bust? Is he a bust after just a handful of games because he's playing terrible? We'll break it down on the other side. My name's Brian Engelman. Thanks for listening to Agree to Disagree here on The New American Media.
You are listening to The New American Media.